In 1960, Dubai was a small fishing and pearl diving settlement on the southern coast of the Persian Gulf. The population was approximately 40,000 people. The economy was built around the sea: dhow trading, pearl diving, and the small-scale commerce that a coastal settlement generates when it sits on a trade route between India and East Africa. There was no airport, there was no highway, there was no air conditioning, which in a place where summer temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius is not a minor detail. There was sand and sea and a creek that served as the harbor, and a ruler named Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum, who had looked at his small settlement and decided, with the specific clarity of someone who understands exactly what they have and exactly what they need to build, that this was not enough. What happened in the 60 years between 1960 and today is one of the most extraordinary acts of deliberate urban construction in human history. Not the most organic, not the most equitable, not the most sustainable, the most deliberate, the most intentional, the most ruthlessly executed vision of what a city could become if the people building it were willing to spend whatever it cost, borrow whatever was needed, and import everything: the labor, the expertise, the tourists, the residents, the capital that the desert could not produce on its own. This is that story, not the postcard version, the financial version.
The oil myth. Before anything else, one thing needs to be corrected. Dubai is not an oil city. Not anymore. Not primarily. The assumption that Dubai's wealth comes from oil is understandable. It is located in the Gulf, it is ruled by a royal family, it has the aesthetic of a place where money is abundant and consequence is optional. But it is factually incorrect as a description of Dubai's current economic model. Dubai's oil reserves were always modest relative to its Abu Dhabi neighbor. At peak production, Dubai's oil output was approximately 180,000 barrels per day. Significant, but not on the scale of Saudi Arabia or Abu Dhabi, whose reserves dwarf Dubai's. By the early 1990s, Dubai's oil production was declining, and Sheikh Rashid and his successor Sheikh Mohammed had already concluded what the numbers made obvious. The oil was not going to last, and the city needed a different foundation. The oil money mattered, critically. It provided the initial capital base that funded the early infrastructure: the ports, the airport, the roads, the basic utilities that made everything else possible. Without the oil revenue of the 1970s and 1980s, the platform on which Dubai's diversified economy was built would not have existed. But the oil is not what built the Burj Khalifa. It is not what built the Palm Jumeirah. It is not what funds the airline that carries over 90 million passengers a year. Understanding what actually paid for those things requires understanding a financial model that is simultaneously more sophisticated and more precarious than the simple oil wealth narrative suggests.
The model: trading entrepot to global hub. Sheikh Rashid's original insight, the one that shaped every subsequent decision, was geographic. Dubai sits at approximately the midpoint between Europe and Asia. It is within an 8-hour flight of approximately 2/3 of the world's population. It has no natural barriers to port construction, and its coastline provides direct access to the shipping lanes of the Indian Ocean. The strategy was to make Dubai the place where global commerce stopped, not to produce things. The desert produces very little. To facilitate the movement of things, the storage of things, the financing of things, and eventually the experience of things for the people wealthy enough to consume experiences at scale. Jebel Ali Port, opened in 1979, was the first major expression of this strategy. It is today one of the largest container ports in the world, handling cargo volumes that make Dubai one of the most significant logistics nodes on the planet. The port did not generate revenue because Dubai had things to export. It generated revenue because Dubai positioned itself as the place through which other countries' exports moved. The free zones came next, designated economic areas where foreign companies could own 100% of their operations. No local partner requirement, no corporate tax, no personal income tax, no import or export duties within the zone. In a region where most countries required foreign businesses to partner with local sponsors who took a percentage of profits for providing nothing except their nationality, Dubai offered full ownership and zero taxation in exchange for one thing: being here. The free zones attracted the regional headquarters of multinational corporations that wanted a Middle East base. They attracted trading companies, logistics firms, media operations, financial services providers, and technology companies that needed a regional hub, and found Dubai's combination of connectivity, business-friendly regulation, and quality of life infrastructure superior to every alternative in the region. This is the first revenue stream, not oil. Trade facilitation, logistics, and the fees, rents, and economic activity generated by being the region's commercial hub.
The real estate machine. In 1997, Dubai made a decision that changed the city's financial model permanently. It allowed foreigners to own property. Before 1997, property in Dubai, like property in most of the Gulf states, could only be owned by UAE nationals. Foreign residents, regardless of how long they had lived in Dubai or how much they had invested in the local economy, could not own the land or buildings they occupied. They were tenants in a country that would not allow them to put down roots in the most literal sense. Allowing foreign ownership transformed Dubai's real estate sector from a local market serving a small citizen population into a global investment destination. Capital from India, Pakistan, Russia, the United Kingdom, China, Iran, and dozens of other countries flowed into Dubai property, not just because Dubai was a desirable place to own property, but because it was one of the few places in the Gulf where foreigners could legally own it. The government entities that owned the land, principally Emaar Properties, partially government-owned, and Nakheel, the developer of the Palm Jumeirah, fully government-owned, sold that land to international buyers at prices that funded the next wave of development. The Palm Jumeirah, announced in 2001, was not just an audacious engineering project, it was a real estate product. The villas and apartments on the fronds of the Palm were sold to international buyers before the construction was complete, with the sale proceeds funding the construction itself. This is the second revenue stream, real estate, selling land the government owned, developed, and marketed globally to international buyers who paid prices reflecting the scarcity and desirability of what was being offered.
Emirates Airline and the aviation strategy. In 1985, the government of Dubai launched Emirates Airline with $10 million in seed capital and 2 aircraft. The timing was deliberate. Dubai was building its real estate and logistics infrastructure. Attracting international visitors and residents required connectivity. Existing airlines served the routes they found profitable, not the routes that Dubai needed served. The solution was to build the airline Dubai needed, rather than wait for existing carriers to provide it. Emirates is today one of the largest and most profitable airlines in the world. It operates a fleet of over 250 wide-body aircraft, predominantly the largest aircraft in commercial aviation, the Airbus A380 and the Boeing 777, on routes connecting every major city on Earth through Dubai. The airline does not just carry passengers, it carries the entire economic model forward. Every passenger who transits through Dubai International Airport is a potential consumer of Dubai's hotels, restaurants, retail, and tourism infrastructure. The airline is simultaneously a business in its own right and a marketing and distribution system for the city it is named after. Emirates operates with certain structural advantages that its competitors dispute: preferential access to airport slots, government-backed financing for aircraft purchases, the absence of pension obligations to unions that burden European and American carriers, and fuel pricing arrangements that its competitors have challenged at various international trade bodies. The airline disputes most of these characterizations. What is not disputed is that it is extraordinarily profitable and that its growth has been central to Dubai's economic strategy. This is the third revenue stream.
Aviation, both the direct profitability of the airline and the economic multiplier of the tourism and business traffic it delivers.
The debt. Here is where the financial model becomes complicated. The construction of Dubai's ambitions, the islands, the towers, the metro system, the airports, the hotels, cost more than the revenues from trade, real estate sales, and aviation could fund in the timeframes that Sheikh Mohammed's vision required. The answer was debt. Dubai World, the government-linked conglomerate that owned Nakheel and drove much of the construction ambition, borrowed heavily from international banks throughout the 2000s. The debt was secured partly by the real estate assets being developed and partly by the implicit assumption, explicit in some lenders' risk assessments, that the government of Dubai and ultimately the government of Abu Dhabi would stand behind the obligations of government-linked entities if they ran into difficulty. In 2009, in the middle of the global financial crisis, Dubai World announced that it was seeking to restructure approximately $26 billion of debt, effectively a request to delay repayment on obligations that were due. The announcement sent shockwaves through global financial markets. The assumption that Dubai's debts were backed by government resources was suddenly uncertain. Bond prices of Dubai government-linked entities collapsed. The cost of insuring Dubai's debt against default spiked dramatically. Abu Dhabi stepped in, the wealthier emirate whose sovereign wealth funds hold assets estimated in the hundreds of billions of dollars, provided a $10 billion bailout that allowed Dubai to restructure its debts and avoid a default that would have had significant consequences for the international banks that had lent so enthusiastically during the boom years. The 2009 crisis revealed the structural vulnerability that sits beneath Dubai's extraordinary surface. The model requires continuous growth, continuous inflows of foreign capital, continuous increases in tourism, continuous expansion of trade volumes to service the debt that funded the construction that makes the growth possible. It is a financial architecture that works spectacularly when the cycle is running and that reveals its fragility when the cycle pauses.
Who is actually paying? The question the title asks has multiple answers, depending on how you define paying.
The international investors who bought Palm Jumeirah villas at peak 2008 prices and watched their values decline significantly in the subsequent years paid. The construction workers, predominantly migrants from South Asia who built every tower and island under conditions that human rights organizations have documented extensively, paid with wages that were a fraction of what the same labor would cost in a developed economy and in conditions that the workers themselves had limited power to negotiate. The international banks that lent through Dubai World and absorbed losses during the 2009 restructuring paid. The UAE citizens of Dubai paid almost nothing. No income tax, no property tax, heavily subsidized utilities and fuel, government employment guarantees, and the infrastructure of a world-class city built around their comfort and status. This is the specific genius and the specific moral complexity of the Dubai model simultaneously. The city was built by people who do not live there permanently, on terms they did not negotiate, for residents who did not pay for it, using capital borrowed against assets that were sold to investors who accepted the risk in exchange for the returns a growing global hub was expected to provide. Whether that is a sustainable model depends on whether the growth continues. Whether it is a just model depends on which participants in the system you ask.
What comes next? Dubai in 2024 is not the Dubai of 2009 and not the Dubai of 1960. The debt restructuring was completed, the real estate market recovered and in many segments reached new highs. The airline continued its expansion. The Expo 2020, delayed by the pandemic to 2021, attracted 24 million visitors and generated significant economic activity. The city continues to attract capital, residents, and tourists at a pace that makes the growth trajectory look sustainable from the inside. The population has grown from 40,000 in 1960 to over 3 million today. A number that is 80 to 90% foreign nationals who are in Dubai because Dubai has made itself worth being in. The question that Dubai's financial model has never fully answered is what happens when the cycle turns again. The 2009 crisis was survived because Abu Dhabi's oil wealth was available as a backstop. Abu Dhabi's oil wealth remains available, but the scale of Dubai's ambitions continues to grow, and the assumption that Abu Dhabi will always be willing and able to backstop whatever Dubai builds is an assumption, not a guarantee.
What is certain is that what was built between 1960 and today, from a fishing settlement of 40,000 people to a global hub of 3 million, is the most deliberate, most expensive, and most consequential act of urban construction in human history. Someone paid for it. The accounting of who paid what and whether the payment was fair is a conversation that Dubai's spectacular skyline makes easy to avoid having.